Hello there, dear friends, and welcome once again to the Relaxed Fantasy Review. Today, we are taking a pause from our series in the brand new Player's Handbook on backgrounds, and we're going to be talking about a mechanic that is built in to the game that is brand new. For a long time, the comparison between martial characters and spellcasters has been apparent. In the early game, martial characters get better defenses, stronger attacks, more sustainability since casters have limited spell slots. But then as the game goes on, the versatility of magic, the scaling of spells, including cantrips, and the ability of spellcasters to simply avoid damage at all times makes it that the extra attacks and extra damage that martials might get seem a little dull or underwhelming. But now in our brand new D&D Player's Handbook, we have a feature called the Weapon Mastery. Instead of simply saying that you hold the weapon in one hand or two, and it deals bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing, and it's ranged or it's melee, now you've actually got some utility options that every weapon has as an option that can affect the enemies you're fighting in more than just I hit you, I deal damage. There have been ways to do this. Battlemaster fighters have had their maneuvers, and there have been blade trips for characters like Hexblades or Bladesinger wizards. And there are certain feats that certainly synergize, but now it's just built into the weapons themselves. One of my biggest gripes about the old Player's Handbook is that weapon choice felt almost like a flavor thing. Take, for example, the three classic one-handed versatile martial weapons: the longsword, the battle axe, and the warhammer. They all dealt 1d8 damage if you held it in one hand. You could grip it in two hands for 1d10. They had a regular reach. They were martial weapons, and they dealt slashing or bludgeoning damage. And it was like, whichever one you pick just felt very flavor. Like, what do you want your character to look like? But now, there are reasons to take each one. Now, we'll get into the mechanics of weapon masteries. There's a lot to talk about. But before we do, I wanted to give you a quick reminder that Relaxed Fantasy Review has memberships. For just $1 a month, you can support me here on YouTube and get a couple benefits. First, you get a little badge next to your name in the comments, letting folks know that you're a supporter. But also you get early access to my videos. I upload videos Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I upload them a day early for members only. If that interests you, you can click the join button just down there next to the subscribe button. I'd love to see you in the comments with your member badges. And if it doesn't interest you, that's totally fine too. My content is free for everyone. There's no hidden videos. And if early access is not super interesting to you, just come on by, watch, like, maybe subscribe if you want to see more. And yeah, that's a really good way to support me as well. So thank you for watching my content here on YouTube. Before we get into the details of the specific weapon masteries, I wanted to clarify that martial classes tend to get them, and spellcasters tend not to, but there are specific classes that can use these. The fighter, the rogue, and the barbarian get them. The monk oddly doesn't, so 3 out of the 4 non-casters get them. And then rangers and paladins also get them. When you start at level 1, you can pick specific weapons. It's either 2 or 3 depending on your class, that you now learn the masteries of, and you can use their masteries when you fight with them. When you long rest, you can swap a mastery out so you can stay versatile. And anyone else can get weapon masteries by taking the Weapon Master feat. It's a general feat, so at level 4 anyone can have it if they really want one. But with that being said, let's discuss weapon masteries in detail. There are 8 of them in total. We'll go in alphabetical order. The first one is Cleave. Cleave was a optional attack option in the old Dungeon Master's Guide, but now it is built in to the Great Axe and the Halberd weapons. Cleave states that if you have the weapon mastery for those weapons, and you attack an enemy with your weapon as part of the attack action, You can attack a second enemy with the same attack action if they're within 5 feet of the other enemy you hit and within your reach. So the idea here is there's 2 enemies standing next to each other. You attack one, and with the same action, you attack the second one, granting you extra attack right from level 1. And this stacks with extra attack as well, so you can attack, cleave. And if you've got a halberd, you can also attack, cleave, bonus action with Polearm Master, for example. All of these attacks, stack up. And cleave does have a downside to it. It's unfortunate that the extra attack you're gaining from cleave does not add your ability modifier. It's just the damage from the weapon, unless that modifier is negative, but that would be weird. So, you're swinging your great axe, you get, the 1d12 for your first attack. Your second attack does 1d12, but only the first one adds your strength modifier. I think that this is a nice way to get an extra attack as long as you've got multiple enemies staying next to each other. There's nothing really wrong with it. You can only do it once per turn, but hey, it's an extra attack. I don't think that's bad at all. I think this is worth 8 out of 10. It's a good feature if you're into that kind of swinging through enemies style. The second weapon mastery is graze. Graze is available in the glaive and the greatsword, and it speaks as such. When you attack an enemy and you have this weapon mastery, if you miss that enemy, you still deal damage to them, equal to the modifier that you use to make the attack. So in this case, it would be strength. Obviously, if you're using like charisma as a hexblade or wisdom as a shillelagh, whatever. If you have a way to use your spellcasting modifier, that's different. But in general, these are strength weapons. And you attack with your greatsword. Normally you do 2d6 plus your strength modifier. Well, let's say you've got a strength modifier of 3. You're level 1 and you've got 16 strength. 2d6 plus 3, that's 10 damage on average per hit. But you miss with this attack, heavy armored enemy maybe, you graze them. Now you're dealing 3 damage instead of 0. I like this feature because it's mathematically sound. When you're working out damage averages overall, you got to consider the dice rolls from 1 to 20, plus your modifier, against the average enemy armor class. And whenever you hit, you do average damage. Like I said, that would be 10 for a greatsword and a plus 3 strength modifier. But if you miss, you deal 0. Now you're changing that average so that your misses are all 3s and your hits are all average 10. The downside to this, unfortunately, is that graze is one of those backup features. It actually says that you can't boost the damage of graze other than by boosting the modifier. So something like a hexed target or a hunter's mark target, this won't work on. Like, you won't add the extra damage to that. You can just boost your modifier. But by boosting your modifier, you're boosting your chance to hit, which means you're going to graze less often. It's a strange anti-synergy. I still think graze is fine. Like, there's nothing really wrong with it. It just gives you a bit of damage when you miss. It's fine. Cool. I say it's 7 out of 10. Mathematically, it's fun, but in reality, it has a little bit of anti-synergy built into it. The next one is the nick property, and this is the one that has all the optimizers losing their minds. The nick property counts for daggers, light hammers, sickles, and scimitars. Notice that you've got a good range of thrown weapons. The light hammers can be strength-based. Daggers, sickles, daggers and scimitars can be finesse weapons. D4, D6. There's a lot of options here. And the nick property says that when you would normally attack with the attack action and use a bonus action to make a second attack with a light weapon, that's something anybody can do, attack, second attack with a bonus action. The nick property says that you can just do it as part of the attack action once per turn. This means that a rogue who's wielding daggers at level 1, who takes the nick weapon mastery with the dagger, can get double attack and then bonus action for a third attack at level 1. This is a big deal when you have ways to boost the damage of single attacks, and that's why the optimizers are loving it. And if you get extra attack later on, then it's attack, extra attack, nick attack, bonus action attack. That's 4 attacks. And because monks don't naturally get weapon masteries, they can't benefit, but if they took the feats, daggers can be monk weapons. Now your attack, extra attack, nick attack, flurry of blows for 5 attacks at level 5. This is wildly strong. And yeah, I see why it's so fun. I see why it's done. And it just makes it so that that flurry of light weapons is more powerful than it used to be. I think this is easily 10 out of 10, and it is arguably the best weapon mastery. We'll see as the builds go on over time. 4th weapon mastery is the push weapon mastery. This can be done with the great club, the pike, the warhammer, and the heavy crossbow, funnily enough. So you got yourself a simple weapon, for those who don't have martial weapons. You've got a two-handed reach weapon in the pike. You've got the warhammer, which is the versatile one-handed, and the heavy crossbow, so you can do this at range with your dexterity. So there's a lot of versatility here in the way you can deal push. And it simply says that when you hit with this weapon, if the target is large or smaller, you can push them 10 feet straight away from you. This is effectively repelling blast, the warlock invocation, but built into a weapon instead of a spell. Now, that's one of the best additions to the warlock casting, is repelling blast, and I think that this is a phenomenally strong weapon mastery. Forced movement is powerful. This has no saving throw, can be dealt with simple weapons, reach weapons, ranged weapons, and you might be thinking, yeah, but it's only large or smaller creatures. How many creatures is that? Well, I looked it up. If you go into the full library of all the monsters in the official D&D canon from 2014 till now, and you look at their stats, you will see that there are about 3,300 monsters throughout all the books, and 2,800 of them are large or smaller. So you are talking about 85% of the monsters in D&D can be pushed without a saving throw by these weapons. That's insanity. I would say that this definitely stands next to Nick as one of the best weapon masteries. It doesn't do extra damage unless you combine it with effects like spike growth, spirit guardians. How about pushing someone off a cliff? And you can do this multiple times. You can hit multiple enemies, pushing a bunch of people, or you can hit the same enemy back, 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 just like repelling blast. It's so much fun, and you can do it right away if you have the mastery in these weapons. I give this another 10 out of 10. It's very, very good. The next weapon mastery is Sap. Sap is available on the mace, the spear, the flail, the longsword, the morning star, and the war pick. And Sap says that when you hit an enemy with this weapon and you have the mastery, they have disadvantage on the next attack they make before the start of your next turn. So this is just handing out disadvantage. Now, this sounds okay. I mean, if you're just a regular old fighter and there's a heavy hitting enemy and you're going to go run up and get in a game of slaps with them where you're just attack, 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 they're attacking you back, and you're just, this makes you much more likely to survive because they'll have disadvantage on their attack, their first attack. That's good. Less likely you'll get hit. But what I love in this is that there's 1, no limit to how many times you can do it per turn, and 2, there's no saving throw, and 3, the weapons, war pick, longsword, mace, these are cool, right? One-handed weapons, two-handed with a longsword. But I love the spear with this. I think about the spear because the spear functions under the polearm master feat. Imagine this for a moment. You're frontliner, you've got a shield, you've got heavy armor, you've got a spear in your hand, and you've taken the weapon mastery for the spear. You hit your first enemy. They have disadvantage on their next attack. You hit your second enemy with extra attack. They now have disadvantage on their next attack. You polearm master, bonus action, and blunts another enemy with your weapon. They have disadvantage. You've just given 3 enemies disadvantage on their next attack. One of my favorite YouTubers, Colby from D4, often talks about tank builds in D&D and how it's great to be tough to kill, but it's also important to discourage your enemies from hitting your allies. He calls these taunts or soft taunts, and they're relatively rare in D&D, but he utilizes them a lot. I think the sap feature, especially when mixed with the spear and polearm master, is the perfect solution for this. Because you don't have to give the enemies disadvantage on anyone other than you if you're giving them disadvantage on just their attacks, like all of their attacks. Now it doesn't matter if they go after your allies or you, they're going to have disadvantage. You're protecting your party, you're protecting yourself. The sap property is perfect for defenders and tank builds because it keeps your allies safer than anything else, maybe other than push. I think that this is a solid choice. It is definitely a 9 out of 10. The only reason it's not 10 out of 10 is because if you're not playing defensively and trying to keep yourself and your allies alive, it doesn't add any damage. It doesn't give you any potential for more attacks or more damage. So it's not quite 10 out of 10, but it's very good for defense-based characters. Next up is the slow property. The slow weapon mastery is available to clubs, javelins, light crossbows and slings, whips, longbows, and muskets. Yes, because the new player's handbook included the pistol and the musket, gunpowder weapons, in their standard weapons, which I think is cool. And slow does a pretty simple thing. You hit an enemy with this weapon, and you reduce their speed by 10 feet. Just like the Ray of Frost cantrip. There's no save involved, you just do it. You can only do it once to a specific enemy once per turn. You cannot stack this with multiple attacks. But if you've got extra attack, or you're using a light weapon and you get multiple attacks, there is definitely options here for hitting multiple enemies. And I actually really like that you can do this with ranged and reach weapons. Slings like crossbows, longbows, and javelins, if you're slowing enemies down, this makes kiting, where you run around enemies and you're shooting them and staying out of their reach, that actually makes it much easier because they can't keep up with you. The whip does the same thing because you've got reach with it. You hit from 10 feet away, you slow them down, you run 30 feet, they can't catch you now. You keep doing it, you've got yourself a great defensive kind of hit and run tactic, and that's really what slow is all about. I think it's a solid feature. It's not one of the most powerful, but it's definitely good, and I give it 8 out of 10. The next one you have is the topple feature, available to quarterstaves, battle axes, mauls, and tridents. The topple feature is in fact the only weapon mastery that involves a saving throw. In fact, it forces a constitution saving throw, making it a difficult mastery to land in a lot of cases. Thankfully, the saving throw is based off of the stat you use to make the attack, so strength or dex normally, and then a spellcasting stat if you're using, Shillelagh or a Pact of the Blade Warlock or something like that. But the topple mastery forces a constitution save when you hit a creature with this weapon, and if they fail, they have the prone condition. There is no size limit on this. It's just con save or prone. I love this one because of a similar reason to the sap feature. You've got the quarterstaff, which can function with the polearm master feat. So you can topple and then attack with advantage, and that's cool. Or you can hit multiple enemies and trip them all. The battle axe is just your classic sweep the legs. Same with the maul. That's a heavy hitter, so you can stack Great Weapon Master on this. And then there's the trident, an often not thought of weapon, which kind of functions like a spear, except it can be thrown. It can be thrown. You can trip people from range, literally throwing a trident and causing them to fall over. That's awesome. I think this is an amazing one. Now, does it add extra damage? Not exactly, but it does grant you advantage because you are knocking them prone. Any follow-up attacks are made with advantage if they're melee, and it forces them to use half their movement to get up, and attacks they make while prone have disadvantage. So by toppling them, you're granting yourself advantage, which means you'll hit more often, so that's a damage boost, and you're costing the enemy speed, more than slow, I'd argue, because because it takes half your movement speed to get up. They've got a 30-foot speed. That's 15 feet they've lost instead of 10. Not to mention, even if you run away from them and they try to make an opportunity attack against you, it's going to have disadvantage because they're prone. It's kind of like the sap feature. There's a lot here. And the fact that it requires a save, honestly, is necessary. Because if it didn't require a save, if it had a size limit like push, this would be completely broken. The ability to knock prone at will. The fact that it is a save that's based on your attack bonus is already crazy enough. I think topple is 10 out of 10, and I think this is my favorite weapon mastery. I love knocking creatures prone, and I think that doing it from range, from reach, using the bonus action from Polearm Master, there's so much you can do here. And yeah, 10 out of 10 for topple, for sure. Finally, there is the Vex property. The Vex property actually has the most weapons, and you'll see that there's quite a lot. And I think they might have thrown Vex on something where they didn't know what else to give it. You've got the hand axe, the dart, the short bow, the rapier, the short sword, the blowgun, the hand crossbow, and the pistol. So yeah, you've got 8 weapons that have the Vex property. Vex property is very simple. When you hit an enemy with this weapon and this weapon mastery, the next attack you make against them before the end of your next turn automatically has advantage. This is especially helpful for rogues because they can attack once with a light weapon, such as a dart or a short sword, and if they hit, then they get advantage on their second attack, which they would use their bonus action for. You wouldn't be able to use Nick with this because, you've got to use your bonus action, and Nick is the only thing that lets you get the 2 attacks with a light weapon. But as long as you got 1 attack with advantage as a rogue, that guarantees your sneak attack. What's more is that characters who have multiple attacks, so if you're talking about a fighter, like at higher levels when they get 3 or 4 attacks, if they're making them with, a pistol or a hand axe or a rapier, now you can give yourself advantage with your first attack by using some other means, maybe a cleric's guiding bolt or a druid's fairy fire, or even if they're prone, you can do this. But once you've hit them 1 time, now you have advantage on the next hit. Then you attack again with the same weapon. If you hit, you have advantage on the next hit. And you can start chaining advantage together so that giving you, as long as you don't miss a hit, which if you have advantage, you're unlikely to, you're just going to have advantage all the time. And that's pretty wild. Now, of course, it does require some setup, and if you're just a single attacker who isn't attacking with a bonus action, then that can be a little bit disheartening because you have to wait till your next turn to get your advantage. But mixing this with the hand crossbow for crossbow expert, mixing it with short swords so that you can, dual wield with this, or hand axes for the same sort of deal. There's so much you can do here, and I think that the Vex property is definitely worth a 9 out of 10. It's not top tier, because advantage isn't the perfect thing to grant, and there's a lot of ways to generate advantage. But the fact that your weapon can give it to you, and there's a lot of ways, a lot of different weapons that do it, peak. Yeah, these are amazing buffs to the weapons of D&D. The marshals who get them are definitely going to feel their battlefield control and their utility in combat get boosted. Extra attacks, damage on misses, pushing, granting disadvantage, slowing, knocking prone. These are things that used to be granted by subclass features, by feats, by spells, and multiclassing. Now a level 1 fighter can just do this stuff with their weapons. And if you know what kind of enemies you're going to be fighting, or you want to switch your tactics up, anyone who naturally gets weapon masteries can switch them when they long rest. It's phenomenally strong, and I think it truly does the job of closing that martial caster gap at least a little bit, giving fighters and other martials so much more to do, and choosing their weapons carefully because they want to get the masteries that matter the most to them. I think that these are a solid addition to D&D, and I'm glad that they're in the new Player's Handbook. This has been the Relaxed Fantasy Review. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe down below. Have a look for the join button down there, and keep your eyes peeled for more mechanic reviews from the New Player's Handbook coming down the line soon. Have a good one, my friends.